There has been a lot of discussion in the media about relationships, men and women in relationships, and how to be in a relationship, how to present, how to be feminine, how to be masculine. There's also been a very popular news article or opinion piece that came out in Vogue titled, "Is Having a Boyfriend Embarrassing?" which to me was a very kind of shallow discussion of having a boyfriend, and I had expected it to be more than it was. I'm almost wondering if I read the whole article, if I only found an excerpt. I don't know. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But it spoke a lot about what it was like in the social media world or in the celebrity world, influencer world, of having a boyfriend. And when content creators get boyfriends, they become less interesting if they talk about them. Or the people become less interesting when they're coupled. And that's embarrassing. And that men will essentially at some point embarrass you. And I thought that this was an excellent way to start a conversation about men and relationships and the role of them. But I did find it to be to lack the vulnerability that I think such a subject really needs. So I'm going to talk today about my relationships, because in the past month, a lot of the abuse that I experienced has come up. Primarily my financial abuse. Essentially, the bill has come, and I am devastated by it. Abuse is terrible because though you are a victim of something, you look like a fool. And so the embarrassment of a boyfriend, I think with abuse, the abuser doesn't look like a fool, you do. The victim looks like a fool. Being with an abuser is like being with a con man. And after you're done being conned, you just look like an idiot. And you feel like an idiot. And no matter how smart you are, you can fall for it. I've always considered myself as a smart woman. But after my relationships, I feel dumb. And it's so hard to come out of that feeling, which is why I want to help people notice the signs and give you the strength to recognize them. That's what books do. They teach us to avoid things, and there is just not a book that could teach me to avoid what I had to go through. So I want to begin this discussion primarily with a quote from The Terms of Endearment, which is my favorite movie because it resonates so much with my own life and how my life has gone. Terms of Endearment is about a woman, Aurora Greenway, who's a matriarch. She becomes a grandmother over the course of the film. And she's a single mother because her husband has died. And she never remarried, so she lived as a single woman with many suitors, many men trying to do things for her all the time because they loved her. And they wanted to be with her, but she would never... sorry, one moment. Someone in a golf cart going by. But she would never actually date anyone. And she had a beautiful daughter, and this is the 80s. 1983 was when the movie was filmed, and when the script was written. It's originally a book by Larry McMurtry. But her daughter is getting married to a man named Flap, and Aurora Greenway knows that Flap is not good. He's not a good husband for her, and she says to her daughter about her marriage a quote that has stuck with me, because in a lot of ways I think it applies to me. She says, "You are not special enough to overcome a bad marriage." That was the 80s. Women's lives were very different in the 80s than they are now. Only recently, if this was the 80s, were they even able to have their own bank accounts without a man's signature. Now women are financially free for the most part, and they have jobs. We have jobs. Most of us have jobs. So in a way, we are better off. So my question to myself is, why is it that in 2025, a statement made 40 years ago, you are not special enough to survive a bad marriage, still applies today and has applied to me? How do you overcome a bad relationship? Do you need something sort of special in order to overcome it? Why is it that women who are in relationships that are toxic, why do they carry the wounds from those relationships for so long? Why don't we necessarily heal? And I'm only speaking to my own experience. I don't know, other people who have been in abusive relationships, I'm sure, have gotten out and flourished. I think when it comes down to why we are so destroyed by a bad relationship, and why relationships can be so devastating, is some of the same reasons why having a boyfriend can be embarrassing. And I think it comes down to labor. There's a great book called The Second Shift by Annie Rothschild, I want to say. I can't remember her name. But it's all about the amount of labor that a woman does in a relationship in comparison to the amount of labor that a man does, and primarily the unpaid labor. So a woman who works oftentimes does a significant amount of other labor, like cleaning, grocery shopping, picking up the kids at school. You think about in a relationship when, like for instance, a kid gets sick, who leaves work? Oftentimes it's the woman that does and the man does not. Who goes to the parent-teacher conference, so on and so forth. Now, this is not, of course, every relationship, and there are plenty of men in this world who make an effort to create an equal distribution of labor within a relationship. But that's certainly not the case with every relationship. And the trend is that women do undergo a great deal more work more than the man on average over the course of a year. And a great deal of that labor is unpaid. So there's that. But I want to add to that and say that there is another form of labor that women undergo, and that is what makes relationships so embarrassing for women, particularly when they don't work out. And it's based on what Scott Galloway, who has been talking about masculinity and how to find a new form of masculinity for men to be proud of. And a lot of it has to do with being earners, being caregivers, being protectors, like that, feeling like you can protect someone and you care for them and you support them financially and things like that. What he says about men is that men are physically very strong, but very emotionally weak. And in my relationships, I have seen that to be true. But I have had relationships, as I have spoken before, that have been very difficult, very unhealthy relationships. And so it may be, and it is because the labor is not equal in the emotional realm, that women are doing far more emotional labor than men in relationships. And that is why when a woman's relationship fails, she is emotionally exhausted in a way that a man perhaps is not. You add the physical onto this. I think that you could expect, if someone is physically strong, then in a relationship they would do most of the physical labor. If someone is emotionally strong, you might also see that that person does most of the emotional labor. And so in my relationships, I have found that I have spent a great deal of my time putting emotional work into explaining for my partner and myself their behavior, and as a result accepting that which I should not accept. And it really comes down to that core idea, which is that I am putting in emotional labor And also financial labor now, because now that women work, we are supporting ourselves and sometimes supporting another man, and at the same time performing the work of the second shift and all of that emotional labor. And so what it looks like is it looks like someone who is trying very hard and someone who is trying not at all. And that is what is so deeply embarrassing about relationships now, is that men are not doing the emotional labor in a relationship that they ought to be doing. And again, I want to say that's not all relationships. But I think that that is, for me, the central issue that has occurred for me. And it begins, if we go all the way back, because I'm eventually going to get to my situation with financial abuse, which has resulted in me being in financial trouble now. I'm going to go all the way back to my father, because I think that the emotional labor I was doing, even for my father, really set the stage for my relationships following. My father was very angry, and he didn't know how to control his anger, and he would scream a lot, and little things could set him off, and he'd just start screaming at us as kids. And there are studies that show that verbal abuse is as damaging to self-esteem and of children as physical abuse. And so being screamed at is the equivalent of being hit. And this is what happened to me regularly as a child. And what that did to me, I think, oddly, is it did hurt my self-esteem, but it developed for me an even more terrible quality, which is what I will call a dangerous level of empathy. It developed in me an empathy that is so strong that it actually hurts me rather than helps me. And I guess you could call it in psychiatric or psychological terms that I struggled with boundaries, and that empathy may be a form of care that just takes down boundaries, and that can be very good. There are certainly boundaries we don't want, but in too much, in too high a quantity, we end up taking down boundaries that really ought to stay up. And so I would not have those boundaries because I was always feeling for people and trying very hard to understand why they were behaving the way they did. And that really started with my father. My father's anger does not upset me or make me mad. It makes me so sad. And that is the big issue. It's because when I'm sad, I don't cut him out. I don't get angry with him. I don't explain why that behavior isn't appropriate. I just get sad and I watch. And I'm sad because that anger has isolated him. And when he is isolated, the anger increases. And as a result, I don't leave his side because I know that everyone has. And that was always the issue for me. I would find men for whom everyone had left their side, and I would be the person that did not. And that for me felt like a safe place because I knew that I wouldn't be left. But it also helped me with my own sadness for the suffering of that person. And I didn't realize all the ways in which this was really leading to my own suffering. My brother never comes home anymore. He avoids it at all costs, and when he does, it's only because he absolutely has to for a funeral or something like that, and he'll only stay for about a day before he leaves. He has completely cut out my father from his life in a way that I cannot do. He has a very healthy relationship. He has a good job. I don't have a healthy relationship, or have not had healthy relationships in the past. And I think it's because of that central difference between me and him, is that he was able to just say no and move on. He does not empathize with my father. He says that's inappropriate behavior and he goes away. I empathize with him. I say that's inappropriate behavior, but. And that has been the central difference between me and him. And it has resulted in his mental stability, his ability to make kind of rational, healthy choices. And me, I really struggle with them. I can't make really healthy choices for myself when it comes to love. I think another thing that being yelled at as a child and having love come with so many sharp-edged swords made me feel as if love was very rare. And that when it comes, one ought to grip it as tightly as possible and never let go. And so when a man finally showed interest in me and said he loved me, I would never ever let go, because I didn't know if it was ever going to come again. And every time I have a relationship, I believe that it will never come again. There will never be another man who loves me. That's the last one. And I will hold on and hold on and hold on. And I have seen other people do this. And I just, you need to say, there will come another. And the next one will be better, because you'll know more than you knew before. But for me, love was like a rare diamond. And you find it in a great muddy mountain, and you hold on to it, and you may never find another one again. And so in a way, a diamond is a great metaphor in putting it on your finger, because love it feels very rare, and you'll never find another. But of course you will. And when you feel that love is a scarce resource, you'll cling to things that aren't really love at all. And that's what I would do. Now, my first relationship, again, was with a man who was 10 years older than I was. And he was an alcoholic. But he wasn't an alcoholic when I first started dating him. I remember distinctly the day he had his first drink after 9 months of sobriety, and how everything changed then. And a man who loved me, I thought, suddenly became cruel. He would call me names, he would yell at me, he would swear at me. And I forgave him every time, because that's what my father did. And I didn't have anyone to tell me, oh, that's not normal. It wasn't until a month ago, actually, that I was talking with some coworkers, and one of my coworkers said my husband swore at me for the first time. And it wasn't even that he was swearing at him. He was just, he said, I don't want to fucking go to that. And that was the first time he'd ever sworn at him. And then the other man I was talking to said, oh, my wife has never sworn at me. I don't think I can remember a single time. And I was amazed. I was quiet. I didn't say a word, because I don't really talk about my relationships with other people, just you. I was amazed, because in every relationship I have been in, I have been sworn at a lot. I've been called a WHORE, BITCH, all of them. Some men have literally sent me long texts, long texts of just vitriol and hatred and anger. And usually they are drinking when they do this, so I forgive them, and I think they don't mean it. And I just keep going. So hearing that was a month ago. I'm 33. That was the first time that I went, oh my God, I don't know what a healthy relationship is, and I don't think I've ever had one. And that was a really hard thing to realize. So when we say our boyfriend's embarrassing, it's not the boyfriend that's embarrassing. It's that I have dedicated myself to people who are mean, and who are mean to me, and I didn't once leave. Didn't think to. I finally left that man because I learned how to drive. That was the great thing that freed me. When I learned how to drive, I could go places and I could meet people, and I ended up going to school. And that was the time that I finally left. I made a friend, a woman friend, and she really helped me understand the relationship that I was in. Before that, I didn't have any friends. I was really alone and isolated, which is one of those really big signs of abuse, that they isolate you from your family and your friends. Now, I was fully isolated from my friends and family. I had a daughter, and I was completely alone. But when I got to college, I was finally able to meet people and learn that there was a world out there. When I left, however, I had not done, and I didn't understand still what a relationship looked like. And I immediately found myself in another relationship with an alcoholic who was struggling financially. And this is where I really come to describe the South and the state of men in the South. And again, I was dating purely blue-collar men, and unusually date blue-collar men who struggle from economic issues in the United States due to a lack of high pay, stability in the job. A lot of manufacturing jobs go overseas that are well paid, and that's kind of the issue there. But the largest part that I have experienced is addiction, which is that addiction is very prevalent among men, and I have seen so many with heavily addictive or addictions to substances. And this person was from the South, from Mississippi. And he had a father who was so monstrous that he ended up in jail for a long time, and then ended up dying of a methadone overdose. Not an overdose. He was on methadone and he choked on a banana. And he died in bed with his sons. This is not unusual. I met another man after this one whose father died of a cocaine overdose in bed with him. And so both of these men saw death at very young ages, 11, 12, something like that. And I suppose you just carry that around forever. But the first man that I'll talk about, his father died that way, and after putting him through an immense amount of pain through so much of his life, that he was, self-harming, and his father called him all kinds of horrible things, and they were in and out of court, and for a while he was living under a false name with his mother because they had escaped the state to escape this man. He's very violent, would try and run people over with his car. He had a lot of guns, and he's just the classic terrible man. And so he grew up with this father, and finally his father passed away, again from the overdose, or rather choking. And he had no belief in himself at all. He didn't think he could ever find a job. It started with him asking me for a joint bank account. That was how it began. And I said no. And from that extended a lot of yelling and a lot of anger. I didn't leave. And then he started asking for money, and he started losing money, and he didn't leave, or I didn't leave. There were a couple of times I tried, but it was very hard because I was dating with a daughter, when I found that when men date me with my daughter, they're very, very kind to my daughter and mean to me. And this is a very smart thing to do because they know that the way to my heart is through my daughter. That if you're kind to my daughter and if you look like a good father to my daughter, then I will have a much harder time leaving you, because I feel that when I'm leaving you, it is going to cause an immense amount of stress and trauma to my daughter. And so my daughter loved him. Even though he was unkind to me and he was financially draining me, I felt I could not go because it would be devastating to my daughter. And that was wrong. My daughter is incredibly, she was aware, I think, that it was an unhealthy relationship. That was just the wrong thing to think. She would have gotten over it, and I think that I did far more damage by staying than I would have ever done by leaving. Because if you think about all the energy that I put into navigating that relationship that I could have put into my daughter, convincing myself that I was navigating that terrible relationship for her sake, when in fact, no, it wasn't. I don't know for whose sake it was. It must have been for my sake, and the fear of being alone and being without that love that I so desperately needed, but which for some reason didn't matter in the same way coming from my daughter as it did from a man. And so that, I think, is why we say having a boyfriend is embarrassing for women, because it really shows us, or it showed me, how easy it is for myself to lose myself in other people in an unhealthy way, and that I still do it, and I don't know when I'm going to get over that. But I had this immense wake-up call because about 3 years into that relationship, after I had helped him build his life, I had helped him build his finances, he got obsessed with this car. And he had realized that if he wanted something, I would find a way to get it for him. That was always the way that I was. I was very careful with money. I worked 3 jobs at the time, and I was saving all the time for my daughter. And I ended up saving enough money to buy my first house then, because I was working so many jobs, working as a dog walker and a church secretary, all of these jobs. And I was able to buy my house. Thank God I did not buy it with him. Never buy a house with a boyfriend. So I had a house, and he lived with me, and he sometimes paid his half of the mortgage, but not often. I was really covering that. I was covering all of our living expenses. Always thinking that he was eventually going to do it, because he was always telling me, oh, I have this idea, or I have that idea. And I believed him. At a certain point, he owed me so much money, and I had invested so much money into him, it felt like that the sunken cost fallacy had really reared its head. I thought, well, if I leave him, I'll never see any of that money. And then I kept losing and losing more and more and more. And so he ended up getting obsessed with this car. And I said, no, I'm not going to help you buy that car because I don't feel comfortable with it. I do believe that cars are one of the primary wealth killers in the United States because they're such an inflated asset. And the second you buy them, they depreciate oftentimes below the value of the loan that you got to buy them. So they are, getting a car loan to me is one of the most foolish economic decisions you can make. Unless, of course, you need that car. But in my opinion, buying cars in cash is always the best option, and that is what I have always done. I've bought my cars in cash. Means I don't have a great car, but it's better than having that car payment and having negative equity in your car. That's what I thought. And I've always thought, never had a car payment because of it. Ever. And he was obsessed with his car. And I kept saying, no, I'm not going to get that car. I don't feel comfortable. And he wouldn't give up. And at some point I broke and I co-signed on that car. And that was, I think, the pinnacle of the financial devastation I went through. He was stealing from me for a long time and I didn't know. And whenever I would ask him for the money back, he'd tell me that I was a narcissist, or there was something wrong with me. Or that I was greedy, all of these things. And I just kind of kept plugging along. And that car ended up being a thing that just destroyed me. Because it was $660 a month. And he promised, of course, he would pay it. And he promised me that if he got the car, he'd stop drinking. And he promised me that if he got the car, he'd go and get another job and work 2 jobs like I was working. And he promised me all these things, and what an idiot fool I was for believing them. And that's the thing, because just last week, he calls me and says, I can't afford the car anymore. And in my mind, I'm going, of course you can. I've been paying the car bill for months because, of course, I don't want my credit to go underwater if he's late on a payment. So I would pay the car bill even though we're not together. And then he would send me the payment. And that was happening for a year. And it felt like I was paying alimony to my ex. And I didn't realize until I was in that situation that so much of my relationship had been him wanting money and seeing me as a personal bank vault. And all the signs were there, and they're always there. But I didn't notice. And I think the most important thing is the second a man says anything mean to you, you have to go, you have to go, you have to go. And I have learned that the hard way. And so when I say, is a boyfriend embarrassing? It's only embarrassing if you are doing all the emotional work and he is doing none. I know that my father was a sad person and that he didn't do the work that he needed to do, and so he made us all do the work for him. And my boyfriends could not figure it out. They could not figure out themselves. They couldn't do the emotional work, and so they made me do the emotional work for them. And that last boyfriend made me do the financial labor as well. I was doing the financial labor, the emotional labor, and all the housework. After that relationship, I was exhausted. And now my entire savings is going to paying off that car loan that I never wanted. And my daughter's college fund is going to paying off that car loan. And I cannot imagine how a person could look at a woman with a child and say, that is my bank. And after a breakup, get angry with them because I am upset that I have to pay off this loan. I have to sell the car and then pay off all the negative equity that's underwater on the loan. And it was a very, very bad loan. And I made the mistake of letting him explain it to me. So bad. And I almost don't even know if what I'm saying will help anyone, because I don't know if anyone is silly enough to do that. Like me. And what the funny thing is, I went to the dealership to sell the car, and they told me I couldn't even sell it without him present. Even though I had been paying for it, even though I was on the loan as a primary buyer. And so now I just have this car with a $660 a month payment. And I don't know, I'm going to transfer the title and everything, but even so, I am thousands of dollars out because of this relationship with a man who showed me 1,000 times who he was, and I never once believed him. He is one who manipulated me and conned me, and I allowed myself to be manipulated. And that was just one more kind of way that I repeated the relationships of my past. I don't know what to say about that. All I can say is that it has been a very hard journey. And I hope that it will get better and that I will recover one day. But when I heard that quote, when I was young, I was 18, I first saw that movie. You are not strong enough to overcome a bad marriage. I thought to myself, well, I would be. So many women, so many strong women have been undone, though. Shirley Jackson, brilliant writer, her husband took all her money. I mean, there are so many people for whom this is a reality, that abuse is a reality. And I always ask, why didn't they leave? That's the central question. Why didn't you just go? And I think it's a belief in the scarcity of love. It is a belief, it is a very painful overabundance of empathy. And the funny thing is, even after all of this, and the amount of money that I have lost to this man, and when I think about money, I think about the labor it took to earn that money and to put it away, save it for my daughter, and know that it is now going to a man who under no circumstances deserves it. That's so hard. But I have to go now because people are making a bunch of noise, and I don't have much else to say other than I hope this does help somebody go from a relationship where someone is being unkind. And I hope you know to leave immediately and to not wait and not worry about how much energy you've put into someone. And that article is having a boyfriend embarrassing. I think more the title would be is having a boyfriend devastating. Because for me it has been. Anyway, I do have a hope that there is someone out there who is kind, who does the emotional labor that they need to do, and is able to financially support themselves. I know that that person is out there, and I'm going to keep looking. And for now, I think it helped me to talk about this, because I can put it down and say, I'm not going to do that again. And so, anyway, I hope you have a wonderful night, and I'll see you later.